First recollections of the Hunter's Hole and the hole at all, it was a river right there where the hole is now, back in about 1944, 45. We'd play along there, a lot of us growing up there, and go over and swim across the river into Mexico and then walk upstream on the Mexican side and swim back across.
The stories I hear is there was a lot of fishing down in that area, and people would go out there during the day and picnic.
Hunter's Hole was a very, very safe place. You could take your kids, you can go fishing, you take a little blow-up boat and spend the day down there.
The Colorado River is an icon of world rivers. It travels over 1,400 miles and drains 7 western states. The headwaters originate high in the Rocky Mountains. Its waterways cut through the innumerable canyons and gorges of the Plateau country before its waters slow and spill onto the lower Colorado River plain. The river meanders through 3 major deserts of the Southwest, and before its waters were captured, stored, and diverted, it emptied into the Sea of Cortez. Now its waters nourish a half-dozen metropolises and irrigate major agricultural areas in the U.S. and Mexico. Before man altered its course, the sediment-laden waters of the river sustained a complex aquatic ecosystem and an expansive forest. This forest sustained diverse communities of humans and wildlife. Hunter's Hole is located along a section of the river known as the Limitrof. Beginning in Yuma, just south of the Morales Dam and extending to San Luis, the Limitrof runs 23 miles along the border between Mexico to the west and Arizona to the east.
Aldo Leopold, who's a recognized wildlife biologist, wrote a book, and in it was a chapter called Green Lagoons, and he talks about the Mexican portion of the Colorado River.
He took a canoe trip from Yuma down to the Gulf, and they were just virtually lost in little backwaters.
He talks about endless numbers of wading birds, egrets and herons, of endless numbers of waterfowl.
It clearly was an important area, and it still is an important area to wildlife moving in the area. It provides a migratory corridor for neotropical migratory birds.
It was considered a forest in the desert.
There were so many cottonwood and willow trees in that area from Yuma down to the Gulf that it created its own climate.
My mother would tell us how she used to paddle into the waters of the delta gathering wild rice. It was a living that derived directly from the river.
By the end of the 20th century, the Limitrof, a once lush habitat for fish, wildlife, and migratory birds, with waters flowing as much as a mile wide, had become a parched and crime-ridden wasteland. In 2006, Hunter's Hole became the staging ground for a pilot project to restore this atrophied section of the river to its former prominence.
I'm standing on the main channel of the Colorado River, the dry channel, in the Limitrof section. And, well, this is the border between the United States and Mexico. To my right is Mexico, to my left is the United States.
The river's so over-allocated that it's nearly impossible to get water to go past that dam without an act of Congress or Mexico changing some laws.
Once in a while it gets some water, but it has been pretty degraded because of the changes on the hydrological regime, the lack of flows, the lack of pulse floods.
The system's so highly altered that unless we actually get a resemblance of the processes back, our restoration's not going to be sustainable.
It's certainly an area that needs to be restored as a whole, as a riparian corridor, as a river corridor.
One of the things we noticed above Morales is that when we took the dredge in there and dredged down 20 feet, and that body of water, all of a sudden the people that were crossing are saying, we're going somewhere else. Well, that somewhere else turned to be the Limitrof.
Drug runners will actually build temporary sandbag bridges across what's left of the Colorado. And early in the morning, they'll come across 60, 70 miles an hour with SUVs filled full of illegal aliens or dope or both.
3 or 4 months ago, I got a call from Border Patrol, and I guess there was a culvert at Hunter's Hole that was stuffed full of marijuana.
The lawlessness, generally, that pervades our border is connected to illegal trafficking, be it drugs or be it human beings.
The United States aren't the only people that are concerned about safety in the river corridor.
When I was there talking with farmers and with some citizens, it was really apparent that they were afraid of talking about security.
For sure there is a fear, and not only in the communities but also in the security agencies.
Informally they will tell you, well, it's not secure, we really cannot enjoy the river right now because it's dangerous.
The amount of crime in the area is worse than it has been in the past, particularly people preying on the immigrants who are crossing to seek work in the country.
There was a gentleman who came across the border. He'd been robbed in Mexico already. When he got to the American side of the border, another group of bandits jumped out and said, "Give us your money." It's kind of hard to do when everything you've got has already been taken from you. He's fed up. He did anything that any person with any dignity would do, and he decided, I've had enough and I'm going to fight back. He picked up a stick and they shot him in the head and killed him.
We have lost control of our borders. This is serious business.
A physical barrier in and of itself is not going to stop anybody. There's always a way around or over or through. You have to back that up with effective surveillance, effective patrol. And it's my belief that in this particular area, clearing the brush so that the patrol units can see, it's going to be the only solution.
The non-native species in this area, the tamarisk thickets, this brush is so intense that if you get rid of it, it takes away the environment that the criminals need to exist in the area. And then if you can bring flow back into the area, actually restore the river, it makes it much more difficult for criminals to cross.
If you've got an open expanse of water, they're either going to have to swim through it, they're going to have to boat across it, they're going to have to do something. It seems like common sense that having some open water is an enhancement of the security of that area.
In the 1990s, just upstream, a similar problem existed. What was once a diverse wetland, popular with migratory and non-migratory birds, became overgrown with invasive plant species. Crime flourished, and the wildlife went elsewhere in search of a habitat. In 1999, the city of Yuma, the Quitson Indian tribe, and the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area implemented the cleanup of the river east of downtown, now known as the Yuma East Wetlands.
We knew that it was going to take an extraordinary effort to get this project off the ground.
The difficulty at that time was the land ownership was so complex. Trying to get everybody to agree, it was deemed to be infeasible.
Essentially, you had some very large tracts of salt cedar which were just isolated and not contributing anything in a diverse way. It was just almost like a monoculture or a culture of one species of plant.
You know, you were talking about an area that was a no man's land that people would not go to. 20 to 30 foot high arundo and salt cedar.
The community turned its back on the river in the late 60s and early 70s. The homeless element came in, the criminal element came into the river.
This place was so horribly overgrown that there were probably 50 or 60 well-established transient camps down in here. From here to Morelos Dam was always a heavy traffic area for drugs and illegal alien activity. With the brush gone, that problem has drastically reduced.
By bringing all the stakeholders together, the Yuma East Wetlands Project has been able to get people to the point where if everybody says yes, the project's a good idea, it's not essential to resolve some of the boundary conflicts.
The East Wetlands has turned the community around in terms of the potential for healing and repair of a really degraded area.
People are now starting to come up and watch us work, and From the policeman on beat to the jogger on the levee, everybody just wants to shake our hand and congratulate us for the job we're doing and for what an improvement we're creating.
The East Wetlands project is a drastic change from what it used to be. This restored marshland is inviting wildlife, especially shorebirds, clapper rails, herons, egrets, back into the wetlands, whereas before they just weren't coming in.
Personally, I thought the East Wetlands was kind of a waste of time, effort, and attitude. And now that it is cleaned up and you can see what is out there, I think it's a big plus for the community.
Some of us hard conservatives appreciate things that carry themselves. This is doing a pretty good job of that.
I'm very impressed with what I've seen. I envision something along that line being done all along the river.
Building on the success of the Yuma East Wetlands, Mexico and the United States have joined forces to restore Hunter's Hole. For one of the first times in the history of these two nations, under the banner of restoration, this small section of the border, instead of separating us, is bringing Mexican and American communities together in a project of mutual environmental and social benefit. This is common ground.
We started with nothing on the project. Some private foundations gave us money to get the permits and get the project rolling.
The Hunter's Hole project has gotten a tremendous amount of government support, both in the U.S. and in Mexico. And I think it's an easy thing for the government to support because it's good for the economy, it's good for border security, it's good for the environment, and it's good for making the community and the constituents happy.
There's been almost $1 million raised for the Hunter's Hole project in under a year. That employs contractors, it employs heritage area officials, it employs in an indirect way the Border Patrol, the Sheriff, the BLM, you know, all those people working on the project.
You literally have probably hundreds of people involved when you look at the whole span of the project.
As you know, with the current financial crisis in America, jobs and pumping money into local communities is really essential. Mexico and the United States are concurrently working on the project on the ground as we speak. Weeding, seeding, building nurseries, doing soil analysis on both sides.
Today we are working with ProNatura, students from the University of Baja California, Mexicali, students from Arizona Western College, and the Border Patrol Scouts. And we're doing a little early action restoration on the Hunter's Hole project.
It's also very exciting to see just the people talking and getting to know each other and exchanging experiences.
Their livelihoods are much improved when there's a river and when they and their families can go to the river and enjoy the resources there.
Through the cooperation of a lot of agencies, we've drilled a well down there, and there's been a lot of groundwater that's been tapped. We have enough water now to do a pilot project in the Limitrof, specifically in the Hunter's Hole area.
Just as the East Wetlands was a spark for other people to see what could be done throughout this corridor, I think the Limitrof will bring the two countries together in a way that will get people start thinking, okay, how can we do this? How are we going to deliver the water? How are we going to ensure it's in the river?
The project's a reality now, and people are putting their shovels in the ground and working. It's alive, it's moving.
It's really based more upon people than it is the science and the engineering, in my opinion. Doesn't matter that it's in another country because people are people and the process will work the same.
A lot of people think that the Yuma East Wetlands and Hunter's Hole projects should be duplicated and used as a model for the entire Limitrof area. I agree with that, but it's much bigger than that, frankly. This is a way that we can deal with a lot of the border issues. A lot of these borders have dry riverbeds that run through them, and this is a perfect model for dealing with those kind of borders. No matter what security agency that you talk to, whether it's Homeland Security, Border Patrol, National Guard, or the Sheriff's Department, they're all going to tell you the same thing. A fence is not enough.
Our design, you know, you would have a 9-foot deep water barrier that you could not drive across.
Restoration is a way of helping the border issue and creating a win-win for everybody.
It can be done. We're doing it. Nobody can say that it's impossible.
With the Hunter's Hole project in full swing, a renewed future for the Limitrof is not just a vision, but a reality. One of the first ever binational restoration projects has agencies taking note of the successes. This collaborative effort is the genesis of a new attitude towards international borders. The hard work of caretaking this abandoned land has restored habitat, created jobs, and enhanced the security for both nations that share this common ground.
Well, I liken it to planting hope. And when I talk to children, that's what I tell them. I tell them that they're planting hope.